Hello, everyone, and welcome to the World Senior Teams Chess Championship. I'm joined by Grandmaster Peter Wells. Hi, Peter.
Hi, Natasha.
And we're going to be following. We're going to be following the top couple of matches in the World Over 50s, and also the top couple of matches in the World Over 65s. And regular viewers will know that England is doing very well in both competitions. So let's start. Should we start with the over 50s?
Yeah, let's have a look at the.
And on board one, so England is up against the Netherland still active players.
Yes, I guess.
I know even at this advanced stage of over 50.
I know the top two boards quite well, and they are still active in the sense of they still play a reasonable bit, I think.
Yeah, and people might know Gerard Welling for as well as his play, he is actually a chess author, and he's written several books, I think. But in particular, one I'm thinking of is one he wrote with England player Steve Giddens.
Yeah.
And wrote an opening. Was it a sort of opening black system that you can play against anything?
You're putting me on the spot there. I'm not sure I entirely remember. I mean, what Gerard
could be wrong. I actually spoke to Gerard just the other day, so I should know I should know exactly what it is. But they had a collaboration.
As a player, is like eccentric, weird opening. I mean, he's not quite a Dutch Michael Basman, but he's, he definitely has his own rather unusual opening systems, which quite distinct, often quite entertaining. And
well, we're gonna see some, I suppose, in just a moment. Yeah.
Yep. Indeed.
Okay, so let's start with Mickey. Okay, so Mickey is black in this game. I'm going to flip. Shall I flip it round? There we go.
Oh, you could do, yes.
Look at that. Yeah.
From Mickey's point of view, does it look better from the black side? Although I'm not sure. I mean, it's a Catalan.
I'm going to start us from the start, shall I?
Yeah, let's go from the start. Some kind of.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
And Mickey, by the way, Mickey's having an absolutely sensational tournament. He keeps getting positions and like must-win situations in the matches. He might be the last board playing, and it's like some drawing endgame with a very slight advantage for him, and he just plays it and makes it look easy. So it's been really great.
I mean, he's very good at converting these small pluses. I mean, one of the things that struck me about Mickey is he for many, many years, he always played the same kind of openings against significantly weaker players, or where he's playing to win with black, that he would play against the very top guys. And then in the last few years, he seemed to vary that a little bit more. But playing black in this sort of bishop b4 check Catalan is pretty much what I think he would be doing against the very top guys as well. So very kind of objective, very kind of none of the practical trickery that you get from some people. He's sort of playing with a straight bat, you could say.
Yeah. Well, I suppose he's just reasoning that playing good moves is going to be a good idea.
Yeah, but of course, sometimes, I mean, for many people, even people with quite good technique, it's not always quite enough. It's frustrating if you play well, get good positions, and can't quite convert or can't quite generate winning chances. But he's showing here that he can, and that's this is interesting. He used to always put his bishop on e7 after giving the check on b4. Now he's played to d6. I mean, they're both perfectly respectable systems, but when I played him once, he had a really
trying to get from the bishop being on d6 then?
Sorry? Well,
what's he trying to get?
Black's sometimes playing, sort of semi-Slav style for some kind of taking on c4 and playing for the move e5, which would sort of never be on the table if the bishop's on e7, where you tend to develop the other one by going b6 and so on. I remember once I played Mickey in one of these things, he put the bishop on e7, and then he had a rather nice move order quirk where he just avoided castling for some moves. And that sort of it put me out of the systems I had wanted to play, and it was quite clever, and I'd hardly seen it before. Since then, it's become quite normal, I think. But yeah, this is interesting. So bishop on d6, and there's still some more moves. That's good. Queen c2,
knight d7, and then both sides castle.
Yeah.
And that's where they are at the moment.
Okay.
So,
I mean, sometimes if white plays knight c3, black can consider taking on c4. because e4 will then get met by e5, and otherwise, sometimes, as in all Catalans, white has to factor in the possibility black might just take that pawn and try and hang on to it. I don't know. Otherwise, black can play sort of, I guess, queen e7, those kind of moves, and play for e5, maybe rook e8. But exactly the theory here, I'm not so certain. But it's another solid setup, but probably fractionally more ambitious, slightly more solid than the bishop e7 thing, which he's done in the past. So. Phelan is another player I know. I think he's probably exactly my age. I sort of, I've got to that point where people you used to play in junior tournaments are now in the seniors, of course. So it's sort of a reminder. But he's been a good solid player, and probably
this is you're talking about Mickey's opponent here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that his rating is probably. I'm not sure. I mean, he probably got to 2400, but I don't think he got a lot higher than that. So his rating has suffered.
So he's kind of maintained it.
Yeah, more than many players at our age have. Yeah. That's quite impressive.
So that could be either he's playing a lot and maintaining his rating, or he simply hasn't played so much.
Yes,
but the team is called Still Active Netherland.
Well, exactly. So I don't think it's the latter.
I assume it's the former.
Maintaining your rating by not playing is somewhat less impressive. And obviously, some people do this as well. But
but quite a few people do play less chess and then take it up again for the seniors, don't they?
Absolutely.
Not so unusual.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
But, I think these two top players in the Dutch team were people who really were active for, reasonably active over the years in all kinds of opens and that kind of thing as well.
Okay, let's have a look at their netboard too. Yeah. So this is an interesting game. Nigel Short against Gerard Welling. Okay, so Nigel is white in this game. E4, C6, D4, and G6. Okay. So now is this the from Gerard's book? We wonder.
I don't know. I mean, some people go D5 there, as in the Caro-Kann, and then if knight C3, they might go G6 at that point, and possibly even if knight D2 as well. Doing it now gives white this extra possibility, which Nigel took up, of not playing knight C3 at all, but putting a pawn on C3 and staying very solid in the center.
Yeah.
But if white's going to advance the e pawn, I suppose that if you're advancing the e pawn, then your center is more solid because you can always meet an eventual C5 with C3, say, as in the French or things like that. But the exact theory of this, I don't know. But of course, one of the points of it is there will be less theory than in some other lines. But what they get now, they get this blocked center. So white played C3 now, I think. Yeah, is that right?
Yeah, C3, bishop G7, and F4. So Nigel's setting up a big pawn center.
Yeah. That's interesting. By the way, Dave Norwood used to do this kind of thing for black. And he would quite often not play bishop G7, I think. They would play D5. And then the argument being that if white advances the pawn with E5, then if you're playing for some C5 break later, it might be better to have your bishop on F8 than G7. Like if the bishop's being blocked totally on that diagonal, then you would say, what's the point of having the bishop there? G6 has served its purpose. And they might use it, to help put a knight on F5 or something like that. But I kind of like the idea of not necessarily playing bishop G7 so early here. But of course, you make white choose another move, and F4 is very aggressive.
Yeah.
You see F4 in conjunction with knight C3 and E5 in these lines a lot. I'm not sure how common it is in conjunction with C3, but it might just be a very, very sensible setup for white.
Yeah. So Nigel's. Well, I see looking ahead a bit that he follows up with E5. I was wondering whether he was sort of going for an F5, but he's going to go for E5.
Well, I think after D5, you have to be a bit realistic.
Yeah,
can't be going for any F5.
F5 ideas. Yeah. So D5, E.
Yeah, I think once you've played F4, you're pretty much committed to E5 here, because if there was an exchange of pawns, even if we went knight D2 and there was an exchange on E4, you would really want to put your F pawn back on F2 again. I think F4 is only there to support E5.
Yeah. So
H5. So black is trying to stop the move G4. in due course, in order to try and create a square on f5 for maybe the knight, perhaps the bishop sometimes. More often the knight, I think. And has Nigel made another?
Yeah, he's gone knight a3. I'm not managing to predict any of Nigel's moves here. Knight a3.
That's quite clever. So it's an interesting. I assume that what he's doing is sort of declaring that he's intending to compete for this f5 square. So he's going to go knight c2 to e3 at some point.
Okay.
And try not to let whatever's sitting on f5 sit there so happily.
Yes, I see. Okay, so Gerard, yeah, right, you're right. So Gerard's going knight h6 to go into f5.
I mean, sometimes black might throw in bishop g4, but I'm sure Nigel's idea, as we're seeing now, is to come and compete for that f5 square, which is a pretty crucial square in this line. I mean, imagine if white could play bishop d3, knight e3, and then actually get to play f5 at some moment. Black's position looks like a bit of a wreckage. Black needs to sort of have something on f5 and solidify it. Natasha, I've made a very schoolboy error.
What's your error?
My error is I've not got my power supply here, and I need to run and get it a moment.
You've not got your what?
My power. I'm about to run out of computer battery, and I need to run.
Oh, okay, yes.
Well, a real schoolboy error, but I will be very quick.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes. Well, I'm going to tell everybody a little bit more about Acqui Terme. So this tournament is being played in the lovely Italian town of Acqui Terme. And so we flew into Milan, and I was just walking, like just a few minutes from the hotel, and sort of one of the first things you get to is this kind of ancient Roman aqueduct. So it's like, and they do it very nicely in Italy. They had it kind of all illuminated, and so if you go at night, they've got this kind of big spotlight on there, and there's got like these 5 arches, and then you can kind of look along the line, and then a bit further down, and you can see it from my hotel room as well, and you see these further bits of this aqueduct, so you can kind of see where this ancient river was. Then also, if you walk past it a little bit further, you can kind of hear the noise of all these insects, like crickets and all this sort of stuff. So it's sort of a lovely town. And of course, in any Italian town, there are lots of gelateria. And so we've been eating ice creams and drinking granite, which is very, very nice.
Sorry about that.
Okay, are you all powered up again, Peter?
I am powered up, at least.
Yes.
My computer.
I've just been chatting touristy stuff as opposed to doing any
advertising Acqui Terme.
It's nice. No, it's
good.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we're going to go on now to the third board, and this features the. I'm going to flip it because Hebs is black, but it features he's the English senior champion, Mark Hebden. He is also the English champion. So he's both of those, and he's playing board 3 on our seniors team. Let's see how he's getting on. So
yeah, this looks like the line which a lot of people find very annoying if they're black and playing for a win. We'll see in a moment what.
E4, E5. So Hebs is kind of the go-to person. If you ever want to know what to do when you're playing E5 as black, just look at Mark Hebden's games and you'll be absolutely fine. You just can get a nice line there. So knight F3, knight C6, knight C3, knight F6, bishop B5. Mind you, I wouldn't do this. Knight D4.
Yeah, but the thing is, after knight D4 is the move which, for most purposes, you want to play, because there are lots of interesting lines and very exciting, even some good pawn sacrifices, all kinds of things. But the problem is that if white does what white did in this game, takes and then pushes the e-pawn, this is kind of, it used to just be regarded pretty much as a drawing line. It used to be regarded as something which white did if white is trying to make a draw.
Yeah, and of course,
I've talked to Mark about this. I know that he's not afraid of it. He has a belief. He quite likes black's position and has a sort of belief in his ability to outplay people here.
Yeah, so he might not mind then this drawing line. I mean, from a team point of view,
he's not going to find it exciting exactly, but I think he probably won't mind. I think he minds much less than some other people might.
Yeah. I mean, I think obviously, because there's a big difference in rating, we have to be honest. And so he definitely wants to win this game, and draw is not of interest to him. But I think what he's saying is, well, even if queens come off or whatever, then he's still going to play it for a win.
Well, yes, and Mark does his, he's a player who plays his systems, and he's unlikely to change them because of a possibility like this. He'll have factored it into his sort of original choosing what his openings are, and he'll stick with them, and he will make the best of this. And I've seen him win the sending before, so
yeah.
And,
okay. So bishop c5.
Okay, well, white needs to be vigilant there, otherwise it's definitely not a draw. But queen e2 check does the trick, I think. Yep.
Spotted the mating threat.
Yep.
Here we go. So queen e6. So already the queens could come off now, and white doesn't take the queen. But
white doesn't want to take. If white opens the f file for black, then already you've got. I mean, part of the problem is that there's not that much. White has those double pawns, but they're perfectly. There's no majority on either side, and there's only one pawn in the center. It's just fairly quiet. But if white takes on e6 and then black has two v0 center pawns and an open f file, that would be very comfortable.
Obviously,
that's not the worry. So white castle,
and then Hebs does take off the queens. So so sort of 2 bishops, 2 rooks each, 7 pawns each. The only real difference is white has these doubled pawns. But you'd have to think it's very drawish, right, Peter?
I mean, it has a reputation for being pretty drawish, but at least there is this tiny asymmetry, and more to the point, I mean, so many openings are just a little bit unpleasant for black these days. There are a lot of openings where it's not that easy to play for a win, and you need to do a bit of work to equalize. And in this one, to be honest, black's got no real problems at all that I'm aware of. It's just a matter of if somebody's playing for a win, they really have to drum something up. And if white's playing for a win, they probably should have played a different line, to be honest.
Okay.
Let's see what they can produce. So,
rook e1.
That move might be notable for basically threatening a fairly harmless double check. As far as I can see, you could allow white bishop b5 check, go to king d8, and there's no
king d8, and then no follow up.
But of course, there's no need to do that. But it's nice to see the occasional harmless double checks. They're usually pretty nice.
Okay, and this is where they're up to.
Okay. Yep.
Fine. Okay.
Not too much more to say about that one. I mean, but I know that Mark will be trying to drum something up. That's for sure.
Yeah, and kind of all the English players have been having. I mean, very, very good tournament for Mickey and reasonable tournaments for everyone else. Hebs he had a loss.
He lost to Novikov, I think. Is that right?
Yeah. But what he did do was bounce straight back and have a very good win the next game, which helped England win their match that day. So
no, I mean, I couldn't see anyone in the team who hadn't been doing at least pretty well. Really, they all seem to be in reasonable form. I mean, it's John Ems who's missing today, isn't it? And he's had a perfectly good
So John Ems is captaining the team. Yes, so I think he's giving. I suppose it's a nice match today, isn't it, with lower rated opposition, and he's giving Hebs and Keith the chance to play.
Yep.
Okay, and let's see, Keith. Okay, and so we have c4.
Okay.
c6. Seeing if Keith gets his Carlsbad structure that he likes so much.
I don't think he's going to get his Carlsbad, but he's going for something pretty solid and not very theoretical.
D5.
Even this position, there are possibly theoretical ways to handle it, but Keith is just trying to get a position and get his pieces out, I think.
Yeah. And
as we know, he thinks in terms of structures rather than in terms of any kind of quick knockouts or tactics.
Oh, for sure, yeah. He's not in any rushes, Keith.
He's not.
D3. Although he plays fast, to be fair, he does play quickly.
Yeah, he's in a rush in that sense. It's true.
e6, but he'd play any number of moves.
D3 feels. I mean, D3 feels like a slightly strange move to me, but I can't think of any reason why it's not perfectly okay. Just slightly unusual to leave the f1 bishop there for so long, but I think it's going.
Yeah, I think he's actually going to transpose into stuff I play. I don't think that's the reason he's doing it, but that's it. Yeah. It's this kind of h6, g3, and he's just going to
always useful to have a square for that bishop.
And he could go like queen c2 and e4 if you fancied it a bit later.
Yeah, the only thing you've got to watch out for after queen c2 and e4 is that once you've played e4, your queen is then on the diagonal of the pawn, and sometimes if you push with e5, d3 can become a bit weak or something. And of course, if black exchanges, then the pawn is pinned for a while. But yes, nonetheless, it's often a perfectly decent system for all that.
Bishop h7.
That's very prophylactic.
Prophylactic moves there from.
I would have been inclined to play a developing move first, but I'm sure it doesn't make I don't think White's got anything so sort of immediate that it's going to make a big difference. But
so, bishop g2, bishop e7. Yeah. So I mean, I guess in terms of comparing the pieces, you'd quite like White's bishop on b2 over that bishop on e7.
Yeah, I mean sometimes. Yeah, I suppose so. But the bishop on h7 is interesting because at the moment, it looks pretty healthy. Sometimes.
Yeah, that's true.
Sometimes you need to be careful that it doesn't get blocked out of the game after some e4 or something. But for the moment here, that's pretty healthy. I mean, the bishop on g2 is always an interesting case because at the moment the diagonal it's on is incredibly well blocked.
Yeah, those pawns on d5 and c6 and b7 are kind of blunting.
I mean, that's
bishop.
kind of in a reverse. This is okay. It would be an relatively unusual system in the King's Indian, but all these things are kind of reverse King's Indians, and we all know that the King's Indian bishop can perform wonders even when it looks a bit kind of blocked in.
Yeah. Now, of course, Keith, if he could take on c takes d5 and know that black would take back with the e pawn, Keith would do it like a flash. That's the pawn structure he likes, with the c pawn swapped off for the e pawn. But here in this position, black.
I think in these lines it's very difficult with that bishop on h. It's very difficult to get a minority attack going here actually, because a3 would be met by a5, and it's quite difficult to.
You wouldn't even be able to get it in.
I don't think you tend to get it in very much here. I think White very often doesn't take on d5 unless they can somehow exploit the f5 square. But that again, it feels like some way away.
Yeah, because none of the knights are really close to it.
Although black can also be pretty solid and take with this back with the c pawn at the moment as well. Which I think White's more likely to go for some e4 plan, but it would be interesting, right?
Yeah, okay. Oh, he is doing this queen c2 thing, it looks like, actually. Castles, queen c2.
Yeah.
a5.
And that's the interesting thing. Where will White find a plan? I mean, White can do a queenside, it's not a minority attack, but White can play sort of a3, bishop c3, queen b2 and b4, I suppose.
By the way, just to say, these players they absolutely will be very familiar with Keith's play. Because when I met the two Dutch players in the middle of town, they were talking about Chess for Life, and in Chess for Life, which is a book about sort of players as they throughout their career, how their chess changes. But in that book, there's a chapter on two chapters on Keith Arkle, one on his kind of Carlsbad structure and one on his rook and pawn endings. And so this Dutch team is definitely familiar with that, and so they'll know that Keith does do extremely well in the Carlsbad structure. So I imagine Pierre Smeets is not going down, deliberately not going down Keith's preferred line.
Yeah, the women played these Dutch guys, yeah?
That's right. Yes. Yesterday, and it was there were draws on the top two boards, and then Pierre won on board 4.
Oh, okay.
Over Petra.
So Keith's gone rook fc1, Well, that's an indication to us that he's not going to go down. I didn't think anything involving an early e4 was very much Keith's style. So I think he will be trying to expand somehow on the queen side, but it remains to be seen. I mean, of course, rook c1 could be intending to prevent black from go. I mean, okay, first of all, when black's played a5, it's slightly less fun to play c takes d5 after that, because then there's a little bit of a weakness potentially on b5. So it could be that Keith could find a way to get what you said is his preferred structure. Of course, everything's a little bit different with the d pawn on d3 rather than d4, but yeah, let's see.
I also somehow think with Keith that he might transfer his queen over to the king side at some point, but we'll see. We'll see if he does that.
How would he get there? That's the question. Go via,
I suppose back via d1.
D1 and to h3 or something.
No, with e. All right, this is a bit contrived. We'll just have to see a bit later. But like d1, e3, and queen e2, some kind of thing like that. But I think it just will have to depend how the game develops.
No, indeed. I mean, that one's it's just about coming up to the point where Keith really needs to commit to a plan of some kind. But
yeah.
So far, he's just been making sensible developing moves, and then we'll see what he's got in mind. Okay, so should we take a quick look at the over 65s?
Over 65s, yes. So that's up here. No, that's board 2. This is board 1. Here we go. Okay. And so in the over 65s, we have England against Hungary on top board. Now, England is the higher rated team here, higher rated on all boards except for board 4. And actually board 3 is very close rating. So we're good at the top and equally and slightly outrated at the bottom.
Yeah, I think it's fairly close at the bottom, I think. So yeah, John Nunn is obviously
Frenchy 155.
Someone who carries on playing kind of quite critical, aggressive openings, even as the years advance. So still open Sicilians, still essentially he's a very sharp, calculating style of chess a lot of the time. I don't know what.
Yeah, no, yes, John's well known for his. Do
you have a view in Chess for Life? I mean, my sort of instinctive prejudice is that people with slow positional styles will age more easily than people with sharp tactical styles. Was that
yeah, exactly. And John, because we did interview John, and I think that's one of the reasons why he particularly likes the senior events, because he can just play his normal stuff, and be up against other seniors who will handle it, it won't be against the junior players who are really booked up on the latest
series.
Analyzing
for hours with the latest
but so that's one of the appeals for him. And so it's lovely. So I mean, isn't it really nice, like seeing John Nunn playing like an E4 and playing Sicilians? And
he's still playing the same kind of openings he would have played back in his heyday, I think, mostly. I mean, I don't know if he's doing all the same stuff with black, but with white it looks still proper aggressive open Sicilians and things.
So knight f3. So this Peter Hardichay, how do you say it? Hardichay is what, going for a dragon against Doc?
Well, this is the sort of, what do they call it? The not hyper accelerated. Yeah, maybe the hyper accelerated dragon. This is the one for people particularly who want to play the accelerated dragon, but don't like playing their knight out to c6 on move 2 because they want to avoid bishop b5. And there's kind of so this one. But there were a couple of costs to that. One is that after d4 takes, white can take with the queen, and that obviously isn't possible after knight c6. But and that can be sort of slightly awkward for black because they have to play knight f6. And actually, I think it's quite navigable, but you need a bit of fairly precise knowledge to get through it. The other thing is that white can switch to some kind of c3 type systems. And black's then committed to g6 stuff, although we'll see what does the and of course the other thing, like any accelerated dragon, white can play a Maroczy bind, which I think is what Doc probably opts for. So D4 takes,
smooth
queen
baron.
takes is the main difference between this and knight c6.
Yeah, so D4 takes.
But I think the doc just goes with the knight anyway. So now it will turn back to the kind of accelerated dragon that black could have had by playing 2 knight c6. I don't think the doc would have had probably the intention to go bishop b5 anyway. So they're both just...
No, yeah, it would have come out the same.
It's wise to cut down your opponent's options just in case if you're happy with the lines it does enable. So bishop e3, I guess. Yeah.
F6, knight c3, d6.
Yeah, this is all fairly standard stuff, and white tends to go bishop e2 to stop knight g4 rather than f3.
Okay.
Keep the f pawn flexible.
Bishop d7, queen d2.
Yep.
Takes. Bishop c6.
Okay.
And so that kind of hits the e4 pawn. So Doc plays f3. We have a5.
Yeah, sorry, can I just? I suspect. Yeah, that's true. Sorry, if white doesn't play f3, black's probably threatening e5. You can't take on e4 immediately because there would be a fork at the end with queen d4 check. But you can go e5 first and then take it. I think that's the threat.
Yeah, so e5.
I mean, e5 is an ugly move to make if you're not winning a pawn, but it's okay if you are. Kind of. So then, so white should play f3 to protect it. And then if white had a spare move here, white would probably might play b4. Did black play bishop d7?
No. What happened was I pressed the arrow to get the next move, but it actually scrolled my screen across as well. So then I went back.
Confused for a moment. I certainly haven't seen bishop d7.
User operator. So I've got to just click the arrow rather than press the arrow.
I was going to say white would want to play b4 if white had a tempo here, and black usually prevents it with a5, which he does.
Yes. So a5 is what was played, and then just b3.
b3. Yeah, I mean, white still wants to play b4, but obviously if you play a3, then black has a4, and that makes it much more difficult to get b4 in long term. White sort of is aiming for b4 and some queens and stuff. Sometimes white can also defend e4 again and play for f4. White's got various plans here. Other interesting questions are what happens if black tries to trade dark squared bishops, which is what happens now, I think.
So yeah. So white's plans, because I suppose I think with a5, white's got a bit more, could put something in on b5 at some point, like that knight.
Yes.
And I'm thinking what are the plans white might do?
Well, I think very much one plan is to try and play a3 and b4.
Yeah.
And expand on the queen side. Another plan is to play something like bishop d3, maybe rook a1 if you had time for everything, and then play f4 and play on the king side. You can pretty much have a choice of sides of the board to play. And I think eventually aiming for b4 is the most respectable.
That's the normal thing.
Option.
Yeah.
Okay. Kind of.
Yeah. All right. And so black.
The other thing is, I think black is reasonably happy to trade dark squared bishops because, well, I mean, it's hopefully it's slightly more complicated than just, then white's left with a bishop blocked in by its own pawns, but there's an element of that. The bishop on g7 is quite a good piece, but white needs to be careful. If the dark square bishops are exchanged, you could easily end up with a situation where the bishop on e2 wasn't great if it was faced by a sort of well situated knight. Although this was exactly a conversation that people were having on Twitter yesterday, where the Hungarian-Australian coach András Tóth had a very interesting position, which kind of looked like a bad bishop against a good knight, but actually the bishop is pretty decent and white's doing very well. And we kind of come into the conclusion it's easy to overrate these good knights sometimes. But in principle here, and I think it's still true, that white wants to keep the dark square bishops on the board. And that's pretty much what happens next, actually.
Yeah, but the moves you were saying just before about the plans for white, and those were like f4 or a3, b4. But both of those, they do put more pawns onto the dark squares. So white will naturally anyway get more squares for that light square bishop. But
the other thing is that I suppose white's partly keeping pieces on as well because white has more space, and when you have more space. There is an element of that as well. Black has to find squares for his pieces, whereas white's maybe, find good squares more easily.
It's true, because if you just swap it all off, it's going to be quite drawish, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, you could take on. I guess you could take on G7 and play F4, and that kind of plan wouldn't be ridiculous. But I don't think it's regarded as terribly scary. And maybe Black can get some things going on the queen side as well.
Okay, so Doc drops back.
There's a clever thing which I don't quite remember. There's some position where the bishop is slightly vulnerable on E3. It might be there's something with. It's going to sound a bit common. I think there might be something where Black goes kind of knight C5 and queen B6, and at some point has a resource with bishop H6 dragging the bishop away. And it's actually just safer to have that bishop on F2 because it looks like it's depriving itself of a decent diagonal from E3 to H6. But there's some prophylactic reason, which I don't remember exactly deep in the theory, why F2 is not a bad square at all.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, so knight C5.
Now, I guess rook B1 to enable.
Rook B1.
Yeah. And white needs to be a little bit careful. I think mostly it's not an issue, but occasionally if you play A3, you need to watch out that Black doesn't have sort of A4, B4, knight B3.
Right, yeah.
But actually, that might be the issue with the bishop on E3. It might have been that after...
Okay, queen has...
No, that wouldn't be it because the rook could take the bishop. I can't remember exactly, but there's something. This is the sort of accurate way to play the old main line for white, I think. I'm not sure this is still what the youngsters are doing, but it's
okay.
Still
all right. Theory has moved on.
I've seen a few games lately where people do this kind of F4 plan and playing on the king side instead, a bit more readily than they used to. But I'm not an expert on this. I sort of, I've played it with white, but never with sort of unbridled enthusiasm. I have to say, I sort of put up with having to do it once or twice. And it ought to be quite pleasant for white. I mean, I think ultimately the Moxie bind still has some, it still is a bit of a bind, as it were, but it's quite tricky to handle.
Yeah.
And of course, Black's got some plans too. Black can sometimes even play F5. I mean, not yet here probably, but that's one possibility. Another is, as I said, to meet A3 with A4 at the right moment. And sometimes Black just plays things that look quite odd, like putting the queen on B6 just in order to develop the king's rook to C8, and probably the queen's going back again. I've seen situations where you get queen B6, rook F8, queen back to D8, and then queen to F8, supporting possible bishop H6 or supporting an F5. Black's, but that looks a bit contorted, and it gives me the feeling that Black's game isn't flowing quite as freely as it might. But there've always been quite a few people willing to play the Black side of this line, and it's an interesting line.
Okay.
So what does he do? Or are we?
This
is where we got to. Okay.
That's where they've got. So we could let's look at the next one, and then we can come back in a moment and see what they do next. Okay. So this one we have. I'm going to flip it. Paul's Black. So international master Paul Littlewood, Black against Andre Vey. So we have a D4 opening. C4, E6.
Yeah, Andre Vey is quite famous in Hungarian chess circles. He was one of these people who wrote quite a lot of opening stuff, sometimes booklets, sometimes kind of CDs and things back in the day, and sort of always going around tournaments and selling some of this stuff as well. And I really liked him. He was a nice, very personable kind of guy.
Yes. Okay. Very good. Do you know what openings he wrote on? Any Nims?
Oh, that I remember something on the Grunfeld. But I mean, I had a very theoretical Grunfeld with him once. I played a very theoretical, and he knew his stuff really well, actually, very deep into the line. And I think it was eventually a draw. He played pretty accurately. He was. I mean, I'm not sure how strong he became, but he always had good theoretical knowledge.
Well, it says I am, so he must be pretty strong.
Yep, indeed.
Yeah. Okay, a3, and Paul takes.
Yep, as you must.
E6.
You can't really go bishop b4 unless you're going to take after a3.
Yep. And f3. Okay, and then Paul plays knight h5.
Oh, well, there were so many variations on these kind of knight h5 things. That, I mean, this is already fascinating stuff. So the usual way to deal with knight h5 is, I think, what End was about to do, which is play knight h3. So that then you can either kick the knight away with g4, or you're just no longer worried about, because in this position, black's threatening queen h4 check.
Yes.
And if g3, then taking, and the h1 rook hangs. So white needs to do something against that. White doesn't have time to just play e4 as planned. So white has to take account of it and play knight h3 or something. But on the other hand, black needs to play pretty actively here to avoid situations where he's just ended up playing knight h5 and losing tempi with that knight. Because the knight's not so bad on f2 either. So white's not. So these systems need some, so now e5 hitting the knight on h3. So white absolutely can't allow bishop takes h3 and queen h4 check. That would be amazing.
Oh, that would be horrendous.
Yeah, so I think knight f2 is pretty much required.
He didn't do that, though.
Oh, did he not? Oh, sorry, or g4. Sorry, or g4 if he's feeling very...
feeling frisky. So he did g4.
This is very entertaining stuff already.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I guess this is quite unusual.
I mean, there are plenty of things where the knight gets driven from h5 with g4, but this one feels a bit unusual somehow. So but queen h4 check, knight f2.
You do get a queen h4 check, yeah.
I don't think the knight can go in anywhere. It can't go to f. Or it probably has no great. It's not great to go to f4 because white's just going to go e3 and kick it away again, I suppose. So white has to go knight f2, I suppose.
Seems it's like a little bit early to get your queen out, isn't it? Queen on move 8. But then I did that.
Here. I assume white can't go sort of king d2 and unfortunately king d2 blocks the bishop, because if you could go king d2 and it didn't block the bishop, black would have to reckon with bishop g5 next move, but because it blocks the bishop.
I have to tell my story about my game against the Icelandic GM the other day.
No, tell us.
Because I was playing this, I played Arneson, John Arneson, right? Who's like a strong grandmaster.
Indeed, yeah.
I played him in round 4, and he'd played Keith the previous day. They had a quick draw. So I said to Keith, like, what's your advice for this game? I said, what should I play? Should I play something, exciting or, different or solid or whatever? And he said to me, play the solidest opening you've got. Just play really solid. Because Arneson, he's so creative and all this stuff. So I went to prep, but I didn't know whether I was playing Arneson or the other one. There were 2 of them, both grandmasters,
right.
and it looked like both of them, their main opening was the Sicilian. So I thought, okay, well, I'll just learn against the Sicilian, and I'll be fine. So I learned all this stuff up, and then so it gets to the board. I play e4. The guy doesn't play Sicilian at all. He plays e5. So I'm like left with, oh no, I'm making it up on spot. And so I played this King's Gambit, which is it can't be the most solid thing.
Not quite in keeping with Keith's advice, is it really?
No. And so anyway, so I ended up with this, and it's like Bishop's Gambit and all this stuff. And so I ended up playing this move 8, my queen out to h5.
Oh, wow.
And after the game, he was very sweet. He said, I like to play the King's Gambit as well. And then he said, but queen h5, it was maybe too much, because he did nearly trap it a bit later. A good game, though. Interesting game.
Great.
But here, Paul Littlewood's queen h4 is more respectable.
Well, probably, yeah. I mean, it's sort of, black needs to be a little wary that the queen can always come out again, but it is sort of hindering white's play. It's forcing white into plan B in some sense, and disrupting a bit.
So
when you do serious work for a game like that, how often do you reckon what you look at actually comes up?
Oh, well, I tell you what, for me, like round 2 and 3, I had exactly the right positions on the board.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, it was really good.
That's already not bad.
Absolutely fantastic prep for rounds 2 and 3. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, that's good.
Mm.
So, so there's more moves here. So knight f2. Okay, yeah, I thought king d2 was obviously has the handicap that it's blocking the bishop, so it's not a very serious move. Knight f2 is clearly the move. Black has to go back. Bishop e3. Okay, so that I think has the not very subtle intention to go queen d2 and bishop g5, trapping black's queen. But patriotic viewers will be pleased to know there are things.
So trapping the queen.
Well, if you can go queen d2 and bishop g5, that queen is history. But I don't see that the move h6 for black damages his cause very much, in which case, I mean, queen d2 is also very unpleasantly placed for white.
Smooth Baron says it's never too early to get your queen out.
Well, no.
Exactly, Smooth Baron.
That was my dad's philosophy as well. Yeah, get your queen out and do a bit of damage was his philosophy, although it did quite a lot of damage to his queen on occasions. Queen d2, I think, once black secures the queen with h6, is badly placed for exactly what Paul's done: knight c6 and knight a5 now. Obviously not now, he's got to play h6 first, but next move, knight a5 looks really awkward for white.
So it's a bit in the balance, isn't it? Because the queen hasn't got any squares, if we're honest.
I don't really like what Endra's done here very much, because it seems to me like knight a5 will be quite hard to meet. It's threatening knight b3, and it's threatening the pawn on c4. Oh my goodness.
Pass was long. He's done this.
That is uncompromising chess. Okay, for the moment then, if knight a5, white's got d takes e5, and black needs to be careful not to get mated on d. Oh, sorry, there's
wait, what are you talking about? Knight a5.
Knight a5, and white needs to do something about knight b3 check, and needs to do something about knight c4. So yeah, white hasn't got time for d takes e5, so he's in, I don't know, this looks really quite artificial for white to me, don't you think? Sort of, his pieces look...
I think it looks... Oh, he's done knight a5.
Yeah, knight a5 is crying out to be played in that case. I mean, does white play... If white has to play something like queen a2, that is definitely...
You definitely got to stop this knight coming in, and it's got two different... It's going like b3 or c4. Both look really good.
It looks
very so you got to stop it.
Yeah.
But so, all right, so say you go queen a2. What about like bishop e6?
Well, exactly. I mean, white will then be forced to play d5, which probably isn't really part of the game plan. I mean, I think this is actually great for black. I think what white's done is really strange. This is what happens if you bill someone as being a bit of an opening specialist when you're making your remarks about them, and then they do this to their position.
So okay, but maybe wait a minute. So what if white might be trying to get in, right? Say you defend it all, and then get in. I was going to say knight d3, and then the bishop back to try and trap the queen, but then you've got queen g5 still, so that doesn't.
But I think you probably can find something to do with the knight on f6 just to enable the queen to slip back anyway. I mean, okay, white might be looking for some g5 move or something. Yeah. So if black takes, then bishop takes g5, and there'll be bishop takes f6 coming and count. But this thing where he has to defend c4 is so awkward that I don't really see how he's going to get time for any of that.
Yeah,
because b3 isn't easy enough, but defending both at once. Apart from
queen a2 is a move. Is there anything else?
Well, I suppose that really is actually a move, because the knight b3 check isn't the end of the world if the queen isn't on d2.
Right. Yeah.
Queen d3 might be more sensible than queen a2.
So queen d3.
But I mean, black can play perhaps bishop e6 to force d5, then bishop back to d7, threatening bishop a4. I mean, it just seems horrible for white to me. To be honest.
I think so too. Look at this.
This is a really, white might be able to find some way to play this, but it's incredibly ugly. I mean, it really is not something I would want to touch with the white pieces. I have to say.
No. Okay, so it's looking very promising for Paul.
It is, yeah. He's a good player, Paul Littlewood, and
yeah.
I mean, he's got, he's sort of steadier than his father was, but with some of his father's aggressive instincts as well. No, I mean, John was very famous as a really no holds barred attacking player, wasn't he? And Paul has a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Of course, I remember Paul Littlewood winning the British Championship in 1982, I think. I remember it for various reasons, including the fact that back in the day of adjournments, I had my longest ever game against him during that tournament. And it completely wrecked my tournament. I think we adjourned 3 times and played
that's a
sort of
nightmare.
12-hour, 11.5-hour game or something.
Yeah.
But somehow it didn't seem to wreck his tournament, which was quite impressive.
Oh. See, I most remember Paul Littlewood from in not chess, from bridge. Not most remember, but I've played Paul Littlewood. Me and my son Oscar, when Oscar was about 7 or 8, we played bridge against Paul Littlewood and his wife.
Oh, of course, yes.
Yeah, which was fun, but they won easily.
Yeah, he's a good bridge player.
He's very good. Yeah. So I'm just wondering if he's like his playing the like partnership game of bridge maybe means he's had to learn to control his his crazier attacking instincts and stuff like that, and play a more sound game. Don't know.
Yeah, it's possible.
It is possible. Anyway, but this is looking really,
it's a glorious position. I mean, I love his position. It's like if you play the Nimzo Indian, you can. The pawn on c4 is so weak. The b3 square is so weak, and white's king's there, and I mean, it's difficult to imagine something more sort of what an Nimzo Indian player would be looking for. I've just thought of something though.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm exaggerating. I think white has the possibility to play queen c2.
Queen c2.
Because the knight takes c4 would allow queen a4 check. And this might be a slightly less messy. I still think black's position is great.
What about you have to allow for that, don't you? So what about bishop d7 then?
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, I still think white's position is really, really nice. I just think
because then you're still threatening knight.
Yeah, especially you're still threatening knight c4. I was wondering if you can then take on e5 and try and do something with the open d file. But no, I mean, basically, I hugely believe Paul's position here. I just think it's pretty ugly. Okay, yeah, maybe in that case, actually, after queen c2, bishop d7, I would take on e5, and if you take back, I'd try knight e4, because at least then I am threatening this sneaky bishop c2 thing, bishop f2 thing.
Okay.
I'm kind of trying to think if you take on
c4,
whether I have something where I can take on.
What if I just go knight? Oh, sorry, my screen went to. Then. Oh, it's flipped the board. It flipped the board back around. There we go. I was like, what's going on here?
Can we put moves on here, or is that?
Can I put moves on? I don't. I'll try.
We can see.
I don't think it's that kind of.
Moves on. Okay, so. But queen c2, bishop d7, d takes e5. I mean, at least white.
So I reckon d takes. If knight e4, can we not still go knight takes c4?
Well, then I think bishop f2.
Oh, bishop f2
is trapping the queen.
Oh, trapping the queen.
Yeah.
That's bad.
Yeah, that's probably not what he wants.
No, that's not the plan at all.
No, it's
fine. All right. So there's something that's in the position.
I'm sure at that point the more conservative instincts kicking in from bridge.
Smooth Baron saying queen c2 castles.
Yes, that's probably more sensible. And then
that's more sensible.
That deals with all of those things, although I can still take and play knight e4, I suppose. But I mean,
same thing.
I'm trying to damage. Once you've taken and play knight e4, black also has the possibility of taking on e4 and going queen e7. I mean, I just think the best that black is doing, white is doing, is damage limiting. Okay, so
he's gone d3. Queen d3.
Yeah.
So we're probably pleased with that though, because then we don't have to worry about.
Well, we were going bishop e6, but I think actually all of them are nice for black. Yeah. Bishop e6 now seems a well motivated move. Why not? Yeah, this is a lovely position. It's just a lovely position.
All right, we better move on because I said.
What on earth is going on board?
Next one. So Nigel, who is the captain. Let's have a look. He is playing white.
Trompovsky.
Traditional
on that if you can get hold
English
of
players opening here.
Yes.
E3, yep. Bishop F5, Bishop D3.
Oh, this is interesting because against most moves, against C5, White was tending to play Bishop D3, but against Bishop F5, the most fashionable thing to do was to play with a quick F3 and G4 and actually attack, and even C4 as well. That's how we used to play this kind of thing.
Okay, so and F3 here.
Bishop D3 is presumably perfectly okay, but
yeah,
potentially less exciting. Although from the position we just saw they reached, it certainly hasn't turned out less exciting. So E6, I guess,
and G4.
That's the spirit. Okay. So, sorry, can you just indulge me a sec? What's the reply to? I imagine there's a good reply to Queen H4, but I just wanted to check what it is.
A Queen H4 now. Interesting.
Well, if you were White, you would just want to check what it was, wouldn't you?
You'd want to check, wouldn't you, just to make sure that's
make sure you're not losing anything serious.
Yeah. Maybe you have to. Well. All right. It's a good question, let's say.
Well,
because if you defend with the queen, then G4's on prise.
Yes.
So, okay, you could drop your bishop back, but then knight takes is a pain. So.
Oh, wait a sec. No, you drop the bishop back, and if knight takes, then you take with the. Oh no, that's right. No, sorry, I was there. Yes, that's true. That's not really very. The problem then is that you can't take with the H pawn. So.
Yeah, because
the rook is on prise, so you don't have any swap with F3 at the end. So you're just.
So I guess you have to take bishop takes E4, do you? That seems to be the thing.
Well, I'm sort of slightly wondering. It's an odd move order. Maybe this is a big trick.
Because bishop takes E4, bishop takes E4, bishop G3. You can do.
Yeah, this is kind of what you might do if there's nothing.
And then you probably can play F3.
Then you'll be able to play F3, and then
maybe
you can bring out your pieces. But yeah, I mean, okay. I mean, Trompovsky players have to be sort of willing to give up the bishop pair in various situations, but it's not the most convincing one I've seen. It's a strange move order. I don't remember having seen this before.
It's a good question, though. Queen H4. Yeah, I wonder if he thought about it or just kind of moved his bishop.
I expect Nigel would have thought about it at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, not sure.
Okay.
Interesting. Bishop G6, anyway.
Yeah.
And now he's going to keep going, I guess, Nigel.
Oh, yeah. Now
our over 65s team is currently playing a lot more aggressively than our over 50s team. Maybe people sharpen again with age. It's a nice thought. So I guess Black should play H5. Yep.
H5 played. And then F3.
Yeah, so he's doing. Now this makes a lot of sense because now he's going to get to mess up Black's pawns with bishop takes G6 when Black has to take back with the F pawn. So I would have thought this is quite a good idea for White if White can do it, and the Queen H4 question was probably the crux of the matter in some way.
Yeah.
But I think Black's about to come up with a radical solution for how to do this.
Black played something. Yes, I was expecting Black to move right, but okay, H takes G4, a sacrifice of a piece.
Yes.
And
for 3 pawns, I think. Yeah, he's going to get 3 pawns for it, I think, because he's got Rook H4 in the middle.
Yeah. And Smooth Baron is saying Bishop E4. I think that's when we were talking about Queen H4. Yeah. Which was the line we came up with in the end.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
Takes and Rook takes here. Wow, how is this? Okay, so I guess we better take the Rook.
Yeah, I think that's probably.
And just move the King D2.
This has happened already, I suppose. Yeah,
it's happened. Yeah,
because that seems pretty much forced. Actually, yeah, I did just check bishop takes c7 in my head, but I thought it was slightly crazy anyway. Oh, it loses completely. You can take and play queen g3 check. I'm losing my tactical antennae this afternoon. So d takes e4, and then white. Okay, so black has 3 pawns, but then the attack is sort of coming to a bit of a standstill.
The king's quite safe, isn't it? If it just goes into c1.
I think so, because white's sort of next move, natural developing move, is knight e2, which kind of helps to keep the king safe and controls the g3 square, so prevents black from pushing that pawn for the moment.
Yeah.
So, but it's still quite interesting for all that. I mean, we're assuming black hasn't moved here yet, no?
No, this is where they're at. Black's having a bit of a think. Because black will want to get some pieces out, like that knight, I suppose.
Yes. Well, one thing he might be... Because I'm thinking that if black takes on e4 straight away with the pawn, white's sort of most tidy setup, if he can get it, is probably to play bishop f1 and then knight e2.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if for that reason there might be a case for throwing in queen f2 check now. Because then if knight e2 you take and the bishop has to go in the other direction. And, that's the sort of thing that might be worth black's while contemplating here. I don't know. What's your gut feeling about it overall? Do you just think not quite enough compensation?
I sort of think I'd like white.
Are you happy sort of playing with a piece against 3 pawns and your king slightly meandering?
I sort of feel like the king's not in that... I could be wrong, but I feel like the king's not in that much.
It doesn't feel to me like it's in terrible danger because the centre's still quite close. But I suppose, black can also try to develop his knight on b8 quickly and castle long or something.
And it's not so easy to get out that white rook in the end.
No, I mean, one thing about having your king on d2, it usually comes with a little bit of developmental, sort of making it a bit more complex to develop. I'll tell you what might be clever, actually. After d takes e4, I wonder if it might be worth flicking in bishop b5 check to try and force c6, and then black doesn't have a kind of knight c6, castles long and angling for e5 kind of development.
Maybe,
Just wonder if that check might be worth...
Bishop b5 and then c6 and then just drop back to...
Then just drop back and then there's no knight c6. Okay, black, and if black plays c5, then the fact that you've got a... Well, I think that black might suffer a bit on the light squares on the queen side after that. So I don't think c5 is part of black's game plan. Yeah, I just wonder if that might... Well, there's a lot for both players to think about. It's incredibly...
Yeah, okay. So queen f2 maybe.
Yes.
Then block that with... Is it knight e2 we're really going to do?
Well, at least for black's point of view, after knight e2, if then d takes e4, if white then gives the check on b5, c6, the bishop doesn't have such comfortable squares to go to. But I don't know. It's a tough one, that, because it could easily be that playing, I assume, at least in some positions, white will be keen to... I'll tell you another... I've just had another thought, actually. In that kind of position with the queen f2, white might be threatening to develop the b1 knight and play queen h1 and then rook f1 trapping the queen. So that's got to be a little bit careful that his queen comes out again.
Yeah.
I rather like bishop b5 check now. I wonder if Nigel will think of this.
Yeah.
I mean, it may be that... I don't know. It's such a strange position. But tremendously, really interesting games in this match.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next one.
This one doesn't look too quiet either. Is this some sort of...
Let's see. Yeah, it must have been... Actually, for lunch, there was some... it was a very nice... not a pudding, but they gave us a drink afterwards, which was like a bit of a sort of granite sweet. It was very nice. It must have inspired all the players, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello, what just happened to the... Oh, you've gone back to the beginning. That's good.
I went back to the beginning. So, okay. So, we are... Sorry, Ian Snape is black, so I'm flipping the board.
When I saw the position, I wouldn't have guessed what the opening moves were, I have to say. It looked like sort of some Albin counter gambit, or maybe one of those strange gambits in the Slavs. But 1 c5, I hadn't thought it might be that. So I guess that he didn't advance.
C3.
Ah.
Takes,
wow.
takes. D5.
Oh, so it is going to be one of those strange gambits in the Slav. It just didn't occur to me how they might reach a Slav exchange position. Right. So this is literally a Slav exchange with all its sort of reputation for not being very exciting, and black is about to succeed in livening it up incredibly quickly.
It's got there in an unusual way.
Yes. Yeah, it's an exact transposition. And, well, White's obviously doing something with where he plays knight c3 without an early knight f3, and that does give black some interesting gambit options.
So knight c3, knight c6, bishop f4.
And now e5. There you go. You see, it's our entire team seems to have quite aggressive instincts today. They're playing as a team. They've all decided to take their opponents off the board in the opening. I don't know the theory of this one, but it's sort of, I mean, on a practical level, immediately looks quite appealing to me. Sort of, I think if it was...
I was just thinking, because in the over 50s, I mean, we already had an England-Hungary clash in the over 50s. Was that yesterday? It was very recently, wasn't it? The top...
Well, I mean, I think because Mickey managed to beat Jozef Horvat with black on 1, I think.
Yeah.
And that was some kind of Catalan, but it was all, I mean, that was a much more solid affair, as you can imagine.
Yeah. So this is the, this is the return match, okay? So
this is the return match. And a very different business.
Yeah, but this, they're all going for it now.
I mean, I think White can avoid this sort of stuff by going bishop f4 and e3 first, which might, if you want to set up where you're not playing knight f3, might be a rather safer way of doing it. This looks, I mean, it may not be, the engine might not like it for black, but it looks like the sort of thing where you'd need to know what you were doing with White in order to emerge.
So do you mean White, because White played bishop f4 pretty early, so maybe just miss out knight c3, did you say?
Yeah, you could miss out knight c3 and go e3, I think. As one system, but that will have some downside. I mean, all of these things have a downside. That will have some. Maybe there might be some queen b6 lines hitting b2 or something. There'll be a way for black to liven it up. I think it's the ones where White just plays knight f3 and knight c3, which are the hardest to sort of really liven up. If White's determined to do his nibbling away at a tiny edge thing, then that's harder to mess with. But this is, if White is the kind of player who wants to play a Slav exchange and just slowly torture you, this kind of gambit is ideal if you can get away with it.
Yeah. No torturing going on
behind Ian Snape's aggression here.
Knight e4 and bishop f5.
Was it Ian Snape who wrote an endgame book some years ago? I have a feeling it was.
Oh, I don't know. I could ask him. An endgame book.
I think so.
Maybe.
But he looks here like a man who's not angling for an endgame. He looks like angling for a middle game to me, so maybe I'm wrong. By the way, I assume that if White had played knight d6 check, although he gets the bishop pair after bishop takes d6, that it's just bringing out black's pieces even faster. There may even be some immediate, issues with that, or maybe black's just going takes and knight f6 and castles very fast. And it's not easy playing with that sort of deficit in development with White on. So I can see why that might, at least knight g3, you win back a tempo by forcing the bishop to move. So I mean, it may well be there in heavy theory here already. Still, I mean, it's a relatively rare line, but it's probably one of those lines I used to know something about but don't anymore. There's a lot of those. But I think I'm in the sort of mood where I would quite enjoy this with black.
E7, A3 takes.
Okay, so bishop takes. He has to take with a knight to defend the queen.
Queen A5. So pinning the knight, but also looking at the pawn on E5. Oh, which is attacked twice. So they're going to have to go F4 if they want to defend it.
Yeah, I guess E6 is legal. I don't know.
E6, yes. Yeah, maybe that's the thing then.
If you do play e6, if I just castle, then if you take on f7, I can take with the bishop hitting the queen. It feels to me like all the scenarios are. Look at the real problem here is there's a knight on g3.
Yeah.
And there's a bishop on f1 which wants to develop, and moving the e-pawn looks moderately dangerous with black's d-pawn on d4. It's difficult to see how white really gets his pieces out easily.
Yeah. So
F4, I suppose f4, f4 doesn't even threaten f5 because the knight's well placed on e7. So
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, I don't know the theory, but just looking at it, certainly from a practical point of view, I think, given that this is the board on which we're outrated, I would be pretty pleased with the way things are going. Really,
good compensation.
Yeah, probably a good choice of opening from Ian, given that he got the opportunity. I mean, when you go d4 c5 and you're
thank you, Free Indeed. So there's a link to Chess Endings Made Simple by Snape.
Very good. Okay, that's good. I'm glad I wasn't making that up. Thank you. Yeah, I don't know. I'm really enjoying what black's doing here, I think.
Very nice.
Right spirit.
Okay, fine. So should we do like just very quick whiz through just the position on the over 50s and then
I should probably head off for a little while.
Yeah, and then we'll be back a bit later in the afternoon. Okay.
Great.
So
Mickey, I mean, this is another example of Mickey, I think, branching out a little bit compared with what I used to see from him. This is, he's turned it into a kind of Dutch. And you can be sure that if Mickey is playing a Stonewall Dutch, it'll be one of the ones he's decided is a very good version of the Stonewall Dutch. I don't think Nigel used to play the pure Stonewall Dutch, of course, but I don't think Mickey would be somebody who'd be likely to touch that. But of course, there are lots of kind of slightly different Stonewall Dutches from various different openings. I mean, I used to play one that came from the Queen's Indian sometimes, and people have a sort of ranking system of which ones they think are playable. So he must have decided this is a decent Stonewall Dutch, and somehow white's no longer got a dark square bishop. Shall we see how that happened?
We'll do that later. We'll see the moves later.
Okay. No, we'll come back.
Doing a sort of.
But anyway, it looks. I mean, white isn't fast on the queen side, and black's clearly playing it in a sort of solid way rather than one of those Stonewall Dutches where you try and give mate. But black's got the bishop pair. He hasn't got. The main weakness in the Stonewall Dutch is the e5 square, and that is. Sorry, I think my daughter's trying to get into the house.
Oh, fine. Well, we can wind up now. And,
okay. Yes, I'd better go and let her in. It would be
okay, right, everybody. We are going to be back at, now let me get this right. It's at 4:30 English time or 5:30 Italian time, depending where you're watching. So thank you very much for watching so far, and we'll see how these matches develop. So thanks very much for watching.
See you later.
In a bit.